Hello, everyone. Welcome to my home. I'm homeless. I have no home. I'm a citizen of the world. I go with the wind, and I split with the wind to make like a leaf blow.
Well, as you can tell, we are with the amazing Jill Freedman here in West Side, Upper West Side.
Lovely Harlem.
Lovely Harlem in New York at her home. She's welcome.
Gentrified Harlem.
And we're doing this for streetphotography.com. Jill Freedman is no stranger to the world of photography. Most of us who will be watching this are familiar with her work, and there will be some young people who are entering the world of photography that may not be as yet familiar with your work. Jill can be found on jillfreedman.com, on Instagram, and also on Facebook. So you can read about her history on her website. Jill, would you like to tell our viewers who you are, where you started, what got you into it, what was it like to shoot street and documentary in the streets of New York and other places, and how it was and how it is, and tell us about yourself.
Golly, that's a lot of stuff. Okay, I graduated from college, majored in sociology and anthropology, and took the first ship I could after that to first Israel, and then shipped to Marseille, where I went to Paris. And while in Israel, when I ran out of funds, I blew what I had left on a nice whiskey in a club where there was one jazz piano player in Israel. And I sat in and sang with them, and the owner of the club said, "You want to sing?" And therefore I ended up singing my way around Europe and Israel. Every time I would run out of money, I would sing. Sing for your supper, and you'll get breakfast, wise men often do. And then I went 2 years, I lived in London from 62 to 4, which I loved. And there I sang around, and then I used to sing every 2 weeks on The Tonight Show on the BBC, which was great fun, where you would close it out. You get on a stool live, and they would say 3.5 minutes or 2 minutes, and there you were. And that gave me time to just wander around for 3 weeks. And I would just wander around London, and all the crazy people found me, or I found them, and down by the pier, the wharfs, and the old ladies, the Charlene singing, "Knees up, Mother Brown, knees up, Mother Brown, knees up, don't get the breeze up, knees up, Mother Brown." And I did that for a couple of years, and then I came back to New York, and I moved to New York when I came back, and figured, what am I going to do when I grow up? I've got to find something that means something to me. And I had a couple of years where I had a job. It didn't mean anything. I was doing well in it, which made it even worse. And then one day I woke up and I wanted a camera. And I borrowed a friend's. I went out in the street, shot 2 rolls. He said, "Do you want me to have them developed and contacted?" And I said, "What's contacted?" And he did. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, I'm a photographer." So I was going to learn and then get back to London. But somehow I fell in love with New York, and I loved, I worked as a copywriter at a great ad agency, Doyle Dane Bernbach, for 2 years. And every paycheck, every 2 weeks, I built my darkroom, and then I finally got my first Nikon F, which I slept with. And, and it came with a 50mm lens. It's wanted wide angle, you move back, you wanted telephoto, you went forward. So I figured that was lucky. I learned how to use a camera and right away was out in the street. And I was teaching myself for a couple of years till they murdered Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968 in April. And when I heard that, I was enraged because I really started shooting because I was so against the Vietnam War. When I came back from Europe, I read both sides of it. There were people handing out leaflets, 65, and I thought, this is wrong. We're wrong. And that's when I wanted the camera. So I started shooting in 1966. And those pictures were anti-Vietnam, all of that. And then when they murdered Dr. King, which was exactly a year to the day that he made a speech in Riverside Church, where he did not talk about black and white. He talked about rich, poor, and the war in Vietnam, which is what got him killed. And he was assassinated 1 year to the day, a year later, in April '68. And when I heard that he had been murdered, I was so angry I quit my job and went on the Poor People's Campaign, which was his last project, which people don't talk enough. When people talk about his legacy, they mention Selma and that I Have a Dream and civil rights, but they don't think of the human rights that he'd done. And he was actually quite radical against the war in Vietnam. And the Poor People's Campaign, they don't ever mention that. 7 weeks, we went out and demonstrated every day the idea to make poverty visible and campaigned for human rights, which was everybody deserves food, clothing, housing, and education, and medical, and all the rest of the stuff that everybody should have. And that was a very important part of his legacy that gets underplayed. And that was my first book, Old News, Resurrection City. I was determined to document it. That was my first story that I ever wrote or shot because I never did that before. And and I realized from the beginning I've always been interested in books, telling a story with books. And after all, we're the people of the book, I love to read, and it's nice, pictures. I fell hopelessly in love with photography. And I had to learn everything. I taught myself printing. And, when you see that first picture come up in the developer, you're hooked for life. That's it. But I had to know the whole craft, how to do it. And I read a million books, and I was smitten and hopelessly in love. And I'd never felt like that. Not for anyone before, or anything. With photography, I was bitten. And so that's how it started, documenting the Poor People's Campaign. And that led to my way of working. Had I had the money, I would have stayed at a hotel. And I wouldn't have gotten what I got. And I met the writer of Life magazine of a story. He was down there with this photographer. And I met him in the food tent, and he said, could I take a look at your pictures? It was a week marching down. And we went through 6 different towns and cities, and then demonstrated, and then slept in people's homes or churches. And he said, well, can I have the film, and we could have it developed? At least you'll have that if we don't use it. And I said, no, you might scratch the film. So they took that and what I'd begun to shoot in Resurrection City, and my first published pictures were in Life magazine for that. And they were damn lucky to find me, too, let me tell you. And so I think I did it the standard rate, and I never got an assignment after that. It was a good start. Mm-hmm. But so then it set my way of working, like I said, where you live with it and roughing it and all that. So Circus Days, my second book, I did the same. I lived with them. We were a bunch of us were sitting around someone's loft and drinking Jack Daniels and smoking dope and talking about stuff. And one of the people was a 6'4" drag queen named Cleopatra. Man. And she was talking about how she used to dress in white satin and white feather boas and ride the elephants in a small southern circus. And when she said that, I said, man, I've always wanted to run away with a circus, which is not true. I'd never seen a circus. I never thought about a circus, except if I read it in Ray Bradbury or a short story or Jack Finley, And the minute I said it, I knew I was, And then my friend just sold a couple portfolios to magazines, Pop Photo or something else. And a friend of mine lent me his Volkswagen bus, and I was off to the circus. So that was 7 weeks of one-night stands, tent up every morning, 2 shows a day, pull it down, on to the next town, drive by night. And there was something. And I took, the film I took, I didn't have money to have it developed as it went along. Again, like a moron. I mean, if one of the 2 cameras had not worked, I wouldn't have known. Thank God it did. They say God protects fools and drunkards or whatever. But anyway, fool, yeah, so. But fortunately, cameras work. And I took color in black and white and ended up only doing black and white. First, because I could print it. And secondly, color's too easy, really. Because you can just see a great red or, I mean, God, I get a color. I could just get another trance, you know. So, and it ended up I did all black and white except one roll. The first day I saw my favorite clown, Billy, who was on the cover of my second book, Circus Days. And the minute I saw him, I had a vision of the clown, the baby clown. You know how baby pictures are always fat little cherubs pushing themselves up from a fur rug? I saw it. So it took me a month to talk him into it, because he was round and loving. Whole month. And then the day he agreed, I went looking for like a field or a wild, you know, that I could do the baby picture. We found it next to a burnt out house. And so the one roll of color I did is a clown in the burnt house. And half the roll, the other half is the baby picture. And that was great. So anyway, like I said, 7 weeks of one-night stands, that became Circus Days. And I also wrote my texts also. And then, somehow, I knew a fireman that used to drink in my local, the Lion's Head, which is a pub in Sheridan Square in Greenwich Village. Dear dead Greenwich Village, it is no more my neighborhood. But anyway, used to drink there and was full of lovely bullshitters, could tell a story. A lot of writers and press people, you know. And this fireman used to come in every now and then. And he'd written a book from his engine company 82 in the South Bronx. This was the late 70s when the Bronx was burning. BBC did a documentary on it, the Bronx was burning. And it was really busy. And anyway, I got to talking to him and I thought, man, that would be a great book, firefighters. You know, I'd love that. So somehow he got me permission from the department. And once I do, I knew not to stay away from the bosses downtown and just stick to my firehouse. So I got the permission, and so it was La Casa Grande, the big house in the South Bronx. And I got a little car, and I used to drive up from Greenwich Village to the South Bronx every day. And first I was going to call the book You Should Have Been Here, because no matter what time I left or when I got there, I would be greeted with, should have been here 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes after you left. And I said, screw this. And I just moved into the back seat of the chief's car. Because women were not allowed to sleep in the dorm. Because all the firemen there were virgins, and they were deathly afraid of a woman being loose in their dormitory. Especially as they slept with, you know, So I said, okay. And at the time, women had to be out of the firehouse unescorted due to a series of naughty little ladies discovered giving pleasure in various firehouses. So the rule was all females out at 10:30. And so I just moved into the back seat of the chief's car, which is on the apparatus floor between the engine and the truck, the ladder. And I just slept there, so I got to go to the jobs in my bed. And I did this for like a year and a half. I started in the South Bronx, and I went down to the Harlem Hilton, which is 69 engine, 28 truck in Harlem. And they were very busy too, we ran all the time. And finished up with Rescue 3, which covered all multiple alarms in all of the Bronx and in Harlem. And at first, they were quite uneasy having a woman around. But, and I know I'm a woman of honor, but they didn't, because I would never betray, I never showed a beer can, did I? But anyway, but they didn't know me, and they called me. I made no pretense, and they called me the liberal. And a lot of them were Vietnam veterans that I called the baby killers. But see, what got me interested in firemen, I compared them to soldiers, and they bring life, not death. They're there to help people, not to hurt them. So I drew that analogy between soldiers and firemen.